So this panel is called Cultivating a Real Estate Farm. Okay, as the market changes, we're going to change too, but for the better. People on this panel, people listening to this panel are going to absolutely benefit from this conversation. I can assure you that. So how do we identify the best real estate farm? Where do you start? What do you do? How do you know it's for you? I'm going to throw this question over to Dan Lesniak to start.
So the framework I used is something I learned in business school. It's this marketing framework called STP. It stands for segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So I like to start by just looking at the overall market, breaking it up into different segments, and then starting to look at each segment and then picking the one you want to target. A lot of times for most people, it's going to be geographic. You're going to do the neighborhood that you live in or worked in before or know, but it doesn't have to be. There's other ways. But pick a target. I think it needs to be not too big and not too small. Most people don't struggle with the not too small, but you do want it to have enough business in there, but you don't want it to be too big. Like if you try to go out and be the agent for your whole city, and if it's like Arlington size, like 250,000 people, that's going to be hard to break into. Right. So when I started my career, I initially targeted 200 units in one condo building, and I kind of spread out from there. So I can have a bigger impact on 200 homes than 200,000. So you don't want it to be too big, and then you have to figure out how to position yourself to that group of people to add unique value, and that's just going to depend on where you are in your career. If you've got a ton of experience and success, you can lean on your past results and social proof to show people how you are, how you've got a track record of saving people time, money, and stress. That's basically the different areas that I think you can add value to buyers and sellers. So, if you're newer, you're going to be looking at your giving them more time typically. So there's all sorts of different ways, but that's the framework that I've used.
Thank you. Appreciate that advice. We're going to move over to Virginia Bond. Virginia, how do you identify the best real estate farm?
So I think there's two approaches. A lot of times agents want to farm right out of the gate when they first start real estate. My theory is you should wait until you have production, because at least a year or two with enough units in the double digits that you can go back and export all your transactions, including any off-market transactions. How I do it is you look at an agent's production for the last 2 or 3 years, and you export it into an Excel or CVS or whatever, and you sort it by zip, by city, by subdivision, and you start to see how many people or how many transactions you've done in a certain area. You start to see like a sweet spot where they're all getting condensed. To me, that's your farm, because I think one of the biggest mistakes agents make when they come out of the gates is they look for an expensive neighborhood and they want to farm, and there they go. They send out 300, 400, 500 postcards. There's no strategy. There's no strategic marketing plan in place to hit all those houses, because they're trying to get that market share in a higher price community. Instead, if you start and you're getting business from everywhere, right? You're getting it from your doctor, your friends, you got to take all of it. But once you've had enough of those under your belt, you'll start to see a pattern, and that's your farm, because those are the people that are reacting to you, that are responding, and they connect with you. Sometimes you're trying to overstretch and connect with a condo building with hip youngsters that have dogs and no kids, and you're, you bake cookies and you hang out with your grandkids. There's no connection there. So when you see that on the spreadsheet, those are the people that when they think of Emilio, there's a sense of trust already because you have a common ground. That's my theory on it.
Love it. Thank you so much. John Eric. We're moving over to John Eric with Compass and handling DC. What's up, John? What do you think? How do I identify the best real estate farm?
Well, so I use a little bit of what both of them just said. The way that I originally started in this business, it's about 20 years plus now, is I focused on my SOI right out of the gate. I had been in the marketing and advertising worlds in Washington, D.C. I had a huge kind of background there. So I started marketing to the people that I knew. I took a little different tact, which is I also did pick a couple farm areas in Arlington, Virginia that I really wanted to market to right out of the gate. And I was very successful in my very first mailing. I picked up my first $1 million listing.
Wow.
And so it depends on who you are. And to Virginia's point, what's your message? You know, what is it that you're offering the consumer, in this case, somebody you may not know? What is it that you're bringing to the table? What is it that you're offering that's different from your competition? And so I had a very succinct message. I was an expert in marketing and advertising. We did kind of staging components even way back when. And so I had something unique for the marketplace that I was able to share, and it resulted in business right out of the gate. So I agree that you've got to kind of focus on the people that know you, because that's where the bulk of your business comes from. But I do think you need to identify neighborhoods. And within those neighborhoods, there's segments within there. So is it a condo that you're targeting, like Dan talked about, a building with 200 units? Is it a luxury townhome community? Is it a single family farm? And my marketing is kind of broken up between those constituencies. So it's my SOI who gets a piece from me on a monthly basis. And then I have sub-markets that I market to all the time as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Question, I'm going to go back to Dan. Dan, is there anything about a farm that should make you avoid that area? Let me give you an example, like maybe a mega agent already having that territory. Should you go after a farm? Should you go after anywhere that, you know, let's say a town or a neighborhood you really want to hit, even though somebody has like 30, 40, 50% market share?
I don't see in our areas places where people have 30 to 40. That's probably more smaller towns where you can get that high of a percentage. You know, Arlington, like 10% is really good in one spot, or even 5. So it just depends on how competitive the market is. But usually most areas are going to be dominated by 1 to 3 agents. So I think if there's 3 really good agents, I would probably focus on other opportunities where there's only 1 or 2. I really like the concept of going after condo buildings or neighborhoods that are like 3 to 5 years old, because they're starting to come up where there's going to be resales, and the builder and the builder's agents, they probably just sold it and moved on and didn't do a good job of keeping in touch. So I think that is an opportunity. A neighborhood or a building that's 3 years old that doesn't have a dominant agent yet.
That's amazing. That's a very good nugget of information, guys. I find that, you know, depending on where you are, the turnover changes. Here in Rhode Island, I know our turnover is 3 to 4 years. People are moving. So you're absolutely right. When we see markets, when we see neighborhoods that are five years old, there's definitely turnover. Virginia, I want to ask you that question. What should you avoid in a farm?
So Dan mentioned market share, and he's right. So for example, I have 30% market share in my farm that I've worked for a decade now. So when you look at market share at 10%, which he's right, you start to have an effect on pricing. That's a really good percentage for market share. When you have 15% market share, you start to control price, as well as 20%. Now you're like hockey stick, right? All the deals come to you because your signs are constantly seen at 20% market share. So he's right. When you start targeting, which again, I do support that, you should be looking for areas to specialize in order to have a consistent business. But when you look for an area, if you see someone with 15, 20+% market share, that is a really difficult hurdle to jump over. You would have to have a very strong value proposition over that agent. And a lot of times when you see that percentage, those people live there in the building or in the subdivision. So if you like an area, find out who has the highest market share, at least the top 2 agents, if there's more than one, and find out if they live there, because then you're climbing a hill that you don't have to. There's plenty of business out there. Find an area that has, you know, no one dominating, or someone, you know, that type of community.
Love it. So if you listen to, or when you listen to Hyper Local, Hyper Fast Real Estate Agent by Dan Lesniak, he says he always highlights stuff with dance tip, and he does that on his Audible. I haven't read the book. I listened to the book, dance tip, and it's always a takeaway. So Virginia, I want a dance tip here for everybody in this chat, in this Zoom meeting. How do you pitch that? How do you pitch that market share on your listing appointments? And by the way, even if you personally don't own that whole market, if your company has a 5%, a 10%, 15, 20% market share in that market, how can we use that to pitch and get listings?
So I use it in a magazine that I send out to my clients consistently. And my coach taught me that. He said, you need to that is the number one message, that once you've earned that market share, you have to continue to market it. Kind of like Coca-Cola. They need to hear it over and over that you're the person that's been taking care of them. That's how I do it, through marketing.
John, how do you pitch market share as, how are you pitching that when you're going on a listing appointment or when you're on a cold call?
So I don't do a lot of cold calls, and unfortunately I don't have to do that. For anybody that does that, that's a great thing. It's just not my kind of niche. I do a lot of luxury upper end properties. I'm really well known in the marketplace for the upper end. I do a lot of private placement as well. So I have a niche within the market, which is upper end bracket properties that we're marketing that we're not bringing through the MLS. And we do a tremendous amount of business there. So people seek me out for that specifically, and that's both Northern Virginia and the District of Columbia. We play a little bit in suburban Maryland, Bethesda, Chevy Chase. But to Virginia's point, we talk about our market stats. I do a lot of luxury townhome sales in North Arlington. I really kind of put that front and center. Compass has come and has a really big market share here in Northern Virginia, DC in particular. We use those stats all the time for our purposes. And we have that back end analytic data that we're able to present, that we always kind of attribute and add to it so people can kind of verify it through Bright MLS or things that we're doing. But we use our market stats all the time to gain listings. And we're really kind of unique in the way that we market that depending on the property and the subject client is.
I want to be like John Eric when I grow up. That's fantastic. You're like, the calls come in. You're like, guy, I built this thing. The calls come in. And I'm sure that our two other panelists have that happening too, which is fantastic. And that's the goal, right? To have a business that drives itself off of your reputation, off of your hard work, off of your referral network, off of your farm. That's awesome. We're going to move along to the next question. What have been the biggest benefits that you have seen from farming? Let's just start with one example. Dan, biggest benefit that you have seen from farming?
I think the biggest benefit is it eventually does what John mentioned and what you said. It drives business to you, and you start to get listing calls because someone saw you sold to the neighbors or helped a buyer get into a place. So I think it eventually it creates a fairly predictable stream of business from one area that you can kind of count on. And then you have to like Virginia said, you gotta continue to market those stats and market that market share once you've earned it, but you can kind of put a box around it and then go off into other areas and expand. So it gives you like a base to build off of and create other parts of your business.
So you emailed me a stat, and I'm trying to pull it up right now, Dan. Farming helped me gain over 50% market share in one building and sell over 22 million in my first year of business. So I think like that it speaks for itself, right? So if anybody is questioning, should I do this? Should I not? I think the biggest thing is number one, what it says behind Dan's head on that poster execution. Stop talking, put in the work, number one. And stay consistent in that farm. Just keep going. You got to keep hitting it, very hard, with all different things. So we're going to move over to John. John, what's been the biggest benefit? Can you give one example of like a compounding effect that has happened from farming with you?
So for me, it's just name recognition and market share. So we do a lot of on the boots events. There's something here that Dan knows. It's called Clarendon Day. And so when we put up a booth here, which is a really big local event, people seek us out because they've seen our name, they've seen our signs, they come to talk. But the other thing that we do through our marketing is that we're talking to them about things other than real estate. We send out things about the best restaurants in Arlington to try if there's something new. We try to be more than just a real estate agent. We try to be the go-to source for all things Arlington. So whether it's restaurants, it's shops, it could be luxury home builders, it could be a variety of different things, best biking and running trails, 5Ks, things of that nature. We try to drive people to us as a point of being the authority on communities in which we work. because that builds business in itself. If you try to keep the conversation always to real estate, so many people will get something and they pitch it. If you give them something like, the Redskin, well, we don't call them the Redskins anymore, the Commanders, football schedule, they like that too. It's Virginia Tech, it's all the universities and stuff that we have around here. So you're trying to be top of mind for more than just real estate. I get calls for, can you tell me the best contractor? I'm trying to build a pool. Who would you recommend? You become the go-to source for everything beyond just real estate. It helps build that market share as well.
John, at this point in your career, how long have you been doing this?
20 some odd years.
20 some odd years. Okay. How many years did it take you to build your farm? I mean, we're still always building, but how many years did it take you to the point where you could go like this?
I don't know if I'm ever going to be like that. So
good answer.
I go to bed every night worried about, is there going to be another deal? And I think that's a safe place to be when you're a real estate agent. No matter how successful you are, is you're not guaranteed business. You've got to go out and create it. You've got to stay top of mind. You've got to work really hard every day. To the sign behind Dan's head, to what Virginia is saying, out of sight, out of mind. If you stop communicating, people forget about you. And I think that's the one thing. It's like any major brand, Coca-Cola, they're out there all the time. They're in a variety of different places. They are a company that I think has probably got one of the best worldwide brands, but it's a case to where, again, out of sight, out of mind. And I do small things. I'm out walking my dogs all the time. I enjoy people. I see people with a license plate. We got a rush of Texans moving into our region now. So I am known for waving at people, and having them put their window down and saying, "Hey, did you just move here from Texas? What brought you here?" I accost people at Whole Foods. I accost people at Mom's Organic or Giant. I like to talk to people. I've always got my card ready, and being able to hand it out. And those are things that kind of help you build. I've got a magazine that we do as well. You're participating in it coming up. That is a lifestyle driver. It is a conversation that we have all the time with people in our local area nationally. I get a lot of business coming out of that nationally. We work really hard on referrals. So all of that kind of feeds into how we farm, because we farm both locally and we farm nationally. And we farm nationally through our relationships with our partner agents from Seattle to Los Angeles to New York to Boston to Rhode Island and all places in between.
Great. All right. Well done. Great answer. Thank you so much. Virginia, what's been the biggest benefit of your farm? Can you give one example of a compounding effect, right? Like you met, let's say you went out, you're door knocking, you met a developer. I don't know. Do you have any stories like that and how it branched off into success?
So for me, starting to specialize in a neighborhood where I was selling vacant land with a developer, I started focusing, taking all my budgeted funds that I used in marketing and just focused in on that when I started seeing that all the other, the majority of my business was becoming from sales in that neighborhood. And what happens with you is you become known, like John said, the expert in that area. I built relationships with builders where I was able to bring business to them. I started making other connections with other developers and learning more, which is what drives me. Is I love learning an area and specializing, so I know how far the hospitals are, what the demographics are. I start to just dissect it and absorb all that information. It's really difficult for another realtor to duplicate that. So when someone's talking to you about that neighborhood, you're like an encyclopedia, which in the end, that's really what you should be, is a source of information, vendors, who services that community, where's the nearest hospital, what are the best schools, all that information, we have it on file. When someone comes in and we take a listing, we already know all the different questions that the buyers have with those particular types of properties, because every neighborhood is different, right? This is a 2.5 acre average lot. The houses are over $1 million. They have septic and wells. So we know vendors for all that, elevators, who the builders were, all that information goes into your bucket of tools. And then the consumer, when they talk to you, they're like, well, why would I bother? Someone else would have to recreate that. So just like in the medical field, specialists in real estate begin to create a pipeline, if you will, of business through their specializing. And that's how you don't have to drive all over town. You just have one spot you focus on. and you provide services to them. And of course, everyone else, but that specialization helps you tremendously.
It's huge. And that gives your buyers, your sellers an extreme amount of confidence on you as a real estate professional, which, by the way, you want to win listing presentations, you need to be confident. 100%. People can smell fakes, they can smell BS. And, it's just going in with all the information, knowing all the players in the market, knowing you have market share in that area, you're good to go, right? Now, I know there's some people on the call right now that may not have market share in an area and that may want to go attack an area. You have to start somewhere, like, again, the poster behind Dan's head over there, execution. Just go for it, okay? Just start knocking on doors, start doing stuff, start getting in front of the community businesses, start posting their stuff out, okay? It's endless. Just do it, right? Let's jump into tech. Tech is always a hot topic, okay? So we're going to go over to John Eric. John, what type of tech, if you want to give us your top two, if you got them, what type of tech have you found to be the best to connect with consumers in a farm area?
So there is a company out of California called Celebrity Agent. If you're not familiar with it, they do an amazing job of micro-targeting. They do a lot of the heavy lifting that we used to have to do, where you created spreadsheets and you try to aggregate information and do all of that. They've got it at a fingertip. They are remarkably good. So if there's one thing I throw out there to you, it's Celebrity Agent is really good at helping you do the things you want to do. So for example, Dan was talking about, buildings that are 3 to 5 years old, and those people begin to sell. This is something Celebrity Agent already has built in. To Dan's point again, we have some very big new construction sellers here, McWilliams, Ballard, things of that nature. They tend to come in and then they tend to leave. So there's tons of opportunities there for you to kind of go in there and create something out of nothing. Celebrity Agent is really good at kind of doing that. And then the other kind of tech piece that we use a lot that I love is a product called High Note. And High Note allows me to, as we get a listing call through a farm area, you get their email, you have these questions. We begin to send stuff about ourselves over to them, and we're able to see within the components in which we build out what they're spending time reading. Because Dan knows this as well as all of you do, which is, Washington is filled with everybody's a chief and nobody's an Indian, and there's not enough time. And so when you see what they've paid a lot of attention to, when you actually sit down with them, then you're able to kind of move through things a lot faster to get to the meat and potatoes of what they're looking for, and kind of make that listing appointment much more succinct into what they actually want to hear from you, because they've been able to digest a lot of the information that you've sent over ahead of time.
Beautiful. Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. Going to move over to Dan Lesniak. Dan with EXP. Dan, what are your top two tech platforms for farming?
Yeah, the top two for me really are my email system, which they're all kind of like a commodity, like MailChimp, Constant Contact, but a good email system to weekly stay in front of the people that you want to do business with, and a good system for managing social media. We've used Hootsuite before and had success with that, so that we're always putting content out in front of the community and the farm. And then there's a couple that we're going to be experimenting with soon on the writing side of it, actually, which it's almost a little freaky. But there's these programs now. Jasper is one we're going to test soon. It actually helps you write blogs. I don't know if necessarily know. I don't know if it'll replace the copywriter completely, but it'll probably augment what they can do. And I don't know. It's a little scary. We're just going to a complete robotic world, but that might just take out authors someday. Who knows?
That's pretty amazing. As you're saying that, I'm also thinking, I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of people out there that like to write, a lot of people that still go to school for journalism, and you're finding that there's fewer, obviously, papers and magazines out there. And there's more companies now that are hiring content creators, right? I heard that recently in a book. I don't know if it was yours or someone else's, but I picked that up. And putting the pieces together. Imagine sending someone out, right, to go to local businesses from your team, interviewing these people, get them on video, get a blog together, blast them out everywhere. Now they're blasting you out in your community, and you're picking up their sphere of influence as well too. So awesome. See, ideas stem off of other ideas. Dan, thank you so much for bringing that up. Quick question for you in your email system, because I know you've been highly successful with these email newsletters, and the industry open rate is probably like what, 11-12%. Click rate is like maybe 1% or so. What have you found to be your open rate on your email and your click rate?
I don't know the click rate off the top of my head, but our open rates are high. They're like 35 to 40%. I don't know why, but that's what they are.
I know why, because you're giving hyper local content and you're targeting your folks. So I would imagine that you're hitting people maybe in a certain condo development or a certain area with information that's specifically important to them. You got to read your book again, bro.
Yeah.
I'm just
I think it's the consistency too, is like we don't stop doing it. So people get used to seeing it.
100%, man. I'm just trying to give you as many book plugs as I can. Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, you're welcome. Awesome, Dan. Great stuff. Thank you. All right, we're gonna move over to Virginia. Virginia Bond, Engel Volkers, Tampa downtown. Virginia, what are the two best pieces of tech that you use?
So we do use email marketing. When I first got the project, there was no follow-up systems in place. And so we implemented Constant Contacts 10 years ago. We scrubbed the list and loaded it. Our open rate used to be in the 20s. We just switched over from Constant Contact from a 10-year e-blast that had a consistent look and feel to it to Resora because of EV. And our open rate right now is 14.7%. The average on Resora is 13.2. Our click rate is above average. We are at 1.7 for the click rate, and I think the average is about 1%. So email is really how I sold that whole neighborhood out of new lots and builds. That's one of the key elements I use. And for me, I think it's important to remember not to hit people so many times. Only send it out when you have a specific message, something of value that you know that audience wants. You should scrub your database in any e-blast system that you have. It shouldn't be everybody lumped in. We sort our database. Everyone is ranked by A, B, and C. They're ranked by buyers. They're ranked by owners. We have several lists, but I don't send an email out and it includes everyone, because nothing gets a bigger eye roll from me than when I get an email from a real estate agent giving me tips on how to winterize my home or whatever it is. Right? I'm like, why are you sending this to me? Right. So I feel like if you're going to use that tool, you should invest the time to scrub your lists and make sure that they're organized. So when you send out a message, it's going to the person that actually wants to read that. Otherwise, you're just spamming people.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris Galvis says, know your audience. Chris, you're absolutely right. Virginia, what about your second tool? So Resora being your first tool. I agree. I think email marketing is very, very powerful. What about your second tool for farming?
So for farming right now, we're using AdWorks because I have my databases and they're updated constantly. AdWorks offers 24-hour advertising to that farm. So we have a link that sends them to a call to action, which is getting a valuation on their property, since that seems to be what most people are interested in, especially now that the market's a little crazy. But AdWorks is the second tool we use. So we stay in front of them without calling. Some people say cold call, like John said. I'm never going to do that. That's just not me. I'm not going to cold call. I'm not going to be harassing you. When I get that from someone, whether it's a lender or title, it's automatically, I don't want to work with you. That's nothing of value. You're just calling, taking up time during my day. So having a marketing tool like AdWorks, constantly sending out your message to your audience, specifically targeted to them, whether you do a radial dial, so you can drop a pin and do a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 10 miles into that subdivision, or you have your email list like we have, which is specific and it's only going to the people that I want to see that message. That's how that's our second tool.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Great information, everybody. Let's jump on to the next one here. What has been the most impactful approach and or tool for farming? So I know we spoke about some. This may get a little redundant, and and panelists, if you have any other things that you want to touch on that you feel are super important for people to know about building their farm, maintaining the farm, cultivating the farm, please feel free to jump in with that. But we're going to go ahead and go back to Dan. Dan, what has been the most impactful approach that you have taken for farming?
I think it's just being consistent. And like John said earlier, always worried about where the next deal will come from. So even if you have a couple of listings and some deals under contract, you're always in your mind, like, how am I going to get more out of this farm or expand the farm, right? So I think it's just being consistent and having the mindset that you're going to continue to grow and dominate that area.
Yeah. Awesome. Consistency is absolutely number one, absolute key. John Eric, okay, I forgot my own question. What has been the most impactful approach for you in farming?
I think when you are setting up your farm, you really got to partition it out. So if there's one thing I leave you with, you're communicating with your SOI differently than you're communicating with somebody that doesn't know you. May know your name because you do a lot in the neighborhood. You've always got to talk about your value proposition. What is it that you bring to the table? I take a little bit different attack too when it comes to an area that we are starting to see a little bit of success, and there could be a bigger agent that plays there. Those things don't scare me. You've got to be very strategic in the way that you go about that, which is who are the talkers in the neighborhood? Everybody knows. You make sure you warm to them. You make sure that you're talking to them and telling them what you're doing, because there are always one or two people in any building or any association or any neighborhood that do the bulk of walking around and doing this, and always making sure that you're top of mind for them, that you stay on their good side. It's things of that are just, they're small things, but that they turn into big things. We have Arlington County is kind of unique in particular. Again, Dan knows this, North Arlington moms. It is a huge kind of mafia online thing where moms talk about mom things and kids and things going on. And you want to make sure that, you've got people that you worked with. So when, hey, is there a great agent in Arlington, that they're immediately sitting there and saying, hey, Dan is amazing, Carrie's amazing, or John Eric's amazing, that you get your name out there through community sources. So you've really got to work this in a variety of different ways. It's not just putting a really beautiful mailer together and dropping it in someone's mailbox. It's not just sending an email. And I agree with Virginia, which is you don't want your emails to become spam. And for the more you communicate with somebody, and it's just kind of generic, the more spam-like you become and people tune you out. And so when we send emails over, our depending on the emails that we're doing, our open rate is somewhere between 50 to 70%, but we're tailoring those really directly to that consumer. So we'll do a set of, use constant contact as well, but we'll micro target what we're saying. So I know these people are foodies. So when we're building out the email, there's a lot of food information. I know I deal with a lot of people who like wine. So we include some wine stuff in there. So we make it very unique to the individuals in which we're sending. Is it time and labor intensive? It is. But the results of that are them sending this to their friend and you getting a referral from something as crazy as recommending, great wines to drink. So you've got to really kind of think about it. A lot of people don't have that bandwidth and have a team structure to kind of build this. So you've got to pick and choose your battles.
Absolutely. Love it. Thank you so much. All right. So we heard from Dan, John, we're going to move over to Virginia. What has been the most impactful approach that you have taken in farming?
So for me, it's been studying. And I agree with everything Eric and Dan said, especially connecting with the chatter of the community, the person that is always talking with everyone, very social butterfly, always stopping. And I know exactly who she is, right? Like I've got a couple of them. I love them. They're like, they love gardening. They usually give me plants. I drop something off when I'm in the neighborhood. It's just making sure I stay connected with them. And they also share with you when someone's thinking about moving or someone's going through something, right? And that's really helpful when you're trying to target. So, and by the way, John, that's impressive, 50% rate that on your emails. I was like,
Yeah.
I got to go back to work. So the most important thing I think for me that made the biggest impact is my background is in new home sales and construction. So I worked for Taylor Morrison, who was formerly known as Morrison Homes. Every time I got a neighborhood, I would study my brochure. When my kids were doing their homework, I would take the brochure out and I would memorize every single little thing about the floor plan, the neighborhood. I would read the deed restrictions front to back, design review guidelines. I would know who the HOA manager was, everything, how far. I use this as a brochure insert. I have a convenience list. It's a distance sheet. I know the consumer can look it up on their phone, but do I really want to hand that task to my client? And I tell them, I know you already spent a lot of time staring at a screen. So we went ahead and took the liberty of Googling on a map how far you are from all these major points. And if there's anything missing on this sheet, let us know. But I study all that. And I take it on like a student. When you try to farm or you're trying to capture business and you're not studying the people you're trying to work with in the area you're trying to specialize in between, then it's these onesie twosies you're getting, and you're no more valuable to your client from deal number 1 to deal number 2. So if you take the time and make sure you read everything about the community, that there shouldn't be anything that's on print or on a website that you don't know. That shouldn't happen. Someone else, right? So that's my biggest takeaway from that.
Be a student of the game.
Yeah.
Right. Be a student of the market. Right, that's fantastic. Good stuff. This has been awesome. And I'm sure we've got a lot of questions that are pouring into our callers, minds. If anybody on this call has any questions at all for our panelists, we have some superstars here. I mean, there's nobody that can answer farming questions better than the folks on this panel. I mean, we searched high and low to get these guys and girl on this call. So any questions, are you new? Are you starting a farm? Are you a brand new agent? Have you been doing it for several years? Are you what type of questions do you guys have? Okay. Any insight into Chime or Chime's geo-targeting or lead capture platforms? I don't know. Does anybody on the panel have, I would rather, instead of certain tech, I would rather just kind of talk about geo-targeting in general. Does anybody have any experience with geo-targeting softwares and or lead capture platforms? Any suggestions, any input?
We've done it through mobile devices. So we've worked with some companies in the past, and we can give them a certain area and it geotags their phone if they have location services enabled, and then it can serve them up ads, and it's like serving them up like the banner ads, which they're not the most effective ads, but it's a pretty darn good subset, that you can potentially know that person walked into an open house or a house for sale. So we've used that successfully before. Okay, so you said geofencing, right? Yeah, it's a geofencing platform. Okay, what's the name of that platform again? We just switched providers. I forget who the new one is actually, but we had a company called Cumulus.
They can do it.
You typically have to be spending a few grand a month on it for it to kind of be effective and worth it. And it depends where you are and your volume and overall business size as to if that particular one would be effective or not. Got it. Love it. Awesome. And Brian, I'm hoping to put together, just a side note, Brian Harris, I'm hoping to put together a mastermind panel on Chime in the future. So stay tuned for that as well. Now, Kim Marion out of Rhode Island, Kim asked, how long do you farm in an area before you expect a response? Does anybody want to answer that?
So that's why I believe in the second option, right? That's not as traditional as waiting until you have some production, because you might find if you pick something that you're not familiar with, right? Or that you haven't interacted with the people that live there, or the neighbors or eat at those restaurants, experience that lifestyle. Well, if you start investing that, you should have a strategic, consistent, well thought out. You should have a graphic designer creating your materials, whether it's an ad online or whatever, but it should all be top notch for a solid year before you start to see traction. It's consistency. In 6 months, you'll notice if what you're putting out is actually being picked up by your audience. But it should be, if you're going to commit to farming, you should have a minimum, and that's the bare minimum of 1 year prepared, the money set aside and exactly what you're going to do for that solid year. That's just how I feel. That's what I think.
My question was, companies like, hi guys,
Hi there.
audience.com, they have what looks like a handwritten note card, and you can put your own messaging in there and it mails. It's a beautiful card and the envelope is handwritten. And I'm just this close to trying it in a farm where I've just started, but I have 4 or 5 sales. So I don't know if anybody's tried that yet.
Say that again. What's the name of it?
Audience.com.
So I will tell you that because I was trained by a builder, handwritten thank you cards and any type of handwritten card has always had an impact. I've had clients walk in with my card and buy from it. So yes, you should. I'd like to know what that is because it is time consuming. So I'm going to look into audience.com. But yes, I think the closer to eyeball without being a nuisance is the key. Making sure that your essence is being transmitted to the audience because that's what they're going to connect to, right? So I agree with you should implement. I'm actually going to look into it because
I'm just about to launch that. So I'd love to catch up and hear how it goes. I'll let you know.
Let me just jump in really quick. So here's a handwritten card. They sit on my desk. Every morning I start out by writing handwritten notes to clients every single morning. And what I do is I scrub people. So I set up a lot of Google alerts. I have a lot of kind of high profile clients that I work with. And so whether they're in the news for whatever it is, and they've got a job promotion or they've just done something, I make sure that I'm sending them a handwritten note. Congratulations on your promotion. Just something very simple. It goes out, it keeps you top of mind. If they just spoke on a panel, you did really well, here you go. There is no substitute for writing this yourself.
Yeah, that's
and you don't, if you want to do a larger handwritten note thing where maybe you're doing 100, you have somewhat of a similar message to people, then I encourage you to use a thing like audience.com. But something like this, if you're not getting up in the morning and having a list of things to do, then you're doing it wrong. And there's always somebody within your sphere of influence that you need to communicate with. It could be a birthday. It could be they just got a puppy. They just had a child. I don't care what it is. Right. There is always a reason to say hello. And I have yet to have one person who's received maybe 2 back cards, one a month that hasn't been called me back and said, hey, I really appreciate the card. This means a hell of a lot more than any email anybody is ever going to get from you. And beyond this, pick up the damn phone.
Yeah. Personalized connections.
It is so important to engage people.
Yes.
And it could be, if they don't pick up, leave a great message. Hey, I'm just thinking about you. It was here. I know you like this. Call them for things other than their business. Correct. That's the key to building your business. I can't say it enough. Call them for things other than real estate. Congratulate them. Be a part of their lives. Client parties, doing a shred day. All of these things matter. And you've got to be in events. You've got to press the flesh. You've got to be out there.
You know what, guys? I would suggest write this book down. 365 Thank Yous by John Kralik. That book, I listened to that book. That book's fantastic. And it goes right along the lines of what John Eric just said. 365 Thank Yous by John Kralik. My suggestion is download Audible and listen to these books during windshield time. Shut the music off. And I'm sure a lot of us do this. Be a student of the game. You can knock out about 26 to 30 full-length books per year, if not more, in the car, and the average American reads 1. So what happens when you're in your market and you're listening to prospecting books and all these other things and self-help books? You're just going to blow up. It just happens. It's the law of the universe. Okay.
On handwritten notes, they work. I've used them for finding off markets when my clients
Yes.
You know,
You
when my
talk about
client,
that.
yeah, I had, I think in my third or fourth month, I had a client who wanted a specific type of townhome, and like we kind of narrowed it down. And I was like, well, there's only 20 of these in existence that will fit your location criteria, you know, the way it faces the sun, all that. So I did handwritten notes, and I just put them like in under the doors of those owners, and got like 3 or 4 phone calls from it. And you know, they bought one of them. I got a listing out of another one, and later on I helped sell another, bring a buyer to another one of them. So those are more effective than direct mail, especially when you're trying to find an off market, because people are going to open up an unmarked envelope more than they'll look at a postcard. And I think it's like a neighbor or a friend. So that works well.
Amazing. I mean, talk about delivery, that, right? Like that's, that is by far, that was one of the best tips that I one of my favorite takeaways from your book was when you did that, and you got a referral from those people, and you got other stuff, and it just was a spider web. And that's the perfect thing that happens in real estate. Thank you so much, Dan. We've got a few other questions here. So Michelle Hale said, I live in an area with lots of condo buildings. Dan, this is probably going to go to you. How, or John, right? How would I choose which condo building to farm? Dan, can you answer that?
I would I would go after the one that has the most amount of turnover and the least amount of presence from, you know, 1, 2, or 3 dominant agents. So, you know, turnover and agent dominance are probably going to be the 2 determining factors.
Mm-hmm. All right, awesome. John, did you have anything to throw in on that?
No, I mean, I think he's right. But the only other thing that I will add is when you pick a condo building that you're thinking of going to, and you've done what Dan just said, get to know everybody who's there in the same way Virginia said. Who's the property manager? Who's on site? If there's a 24-hour concierge, you've got to make friends with these people. We drop off a hell of a lot of cookies and a whole lot of cupcakes and, you know, Starbucks cards and things of that nature, because we always want to be top of mind. And you tend to see a lot of turnover in these buildings. So you've got to show up often and say hello. Mm-hmm. The custodial staff and the people who, you know, Dan and I know a building, and he used to live in it, called Turnberry. And, you know, they have people that park your car for you. You know, you've got to know everybody who's working within a facility. Do your homework, to what Virginia said. Really know the ins and outs of it. Know the floor plans, know the locations, the tiers, and then go for it. Don't let fear stop you from trying something. It's the number one thing. Agents get stuck in their own way.
Absolutely.
Let that happen.
No. All right. So we're gonna now. I want you guys. I want some quick closing remarks from you. Okay. So we're gonna start with Virginia. Virginia, what is one piece of advice that you could give to everybody here that's maybe questioning their abilities, or questioning if they should go out and talk with strangers and farm or whatever? You know, any type of advice that you can give our audience?
The most important thing is your mind. Above anything you do, anything you approach, your mind. You got to get clear on what you want. And if you have an insecurity, address it. There's resources everywhere, books, you can pay your deductible, get some therapy, whatever you got to do. But when you're going after something that intimidates you, pat yourself on the back, because that takes courage. And then address whatever hurdles you have that you think about yourself that might be limiting. That's my biggest advice.
Fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Virginia. All right, we're going to jump over to Dan Lesniak. Dan, 60 seconds. Best advice you can give somebody. 60 seconds.
I think mindset and consistency, which we've addressed in a couple different ways. And if you're newer, don't be afraid, just because there is some good agents in that farm already. You know, you are going to be able to trade and sell them on your time. You know, if you're competing against a bigger agent, you know, you're going to be able to tell them, like, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if this agent, if Dan, you know, if he messes up a listing, it's not going to affect him. He's got a lot more track record and this, that, and the other. Like, for me, yes, I'm new, like, acknowledge it. But you're going to get 100% of me. I'm fully vested because if I screw this up, I might not get another shot. So that's, I think if you're newer going in there, have that kind of mindset. Don't try to hide the fact that you're new. Just lean into the advantages that might give you with them.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great advice, Dan. Really, really honored to have you guys all here today. John, Eric, we're going to end with you, brother. What's the best advice you can give this group of folks on farming or on business, anything?
Well, first and foremost, your farming should be part of your business plan. And if you're not doing a business plan on a yearly basis, you're doing it wrong. First and foremost, and it doesn't have to be a long business plan. It could be just one side of a page. Here's the production you want to do. How are you going to get there? How many people do you have to touch on a daily basis? You have to have a business plan, and marketing and advertising are components of it, community events, things of that nature. And the other thing beyond, having the right mindset is get out of your own way. So many of us don't do something in life because we're afraid of failure. My biggest successes have come from my biggest failures. And if you're not afraid to fail, you're never going to win. And that's the thing that I take away every day. I'm never afraid to try something new. And if it doesn't work, you learn something. You learned a way not to do something. And that's a valuable thing as well as something that works. But write stuff down, pick up the phone, engage people, stop relying on this for sending text messages and emails. You have to engage people in order to win. It still requires you to talk.